What's up guys, and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, this is not exactly your typical day-to-day video that you see on this channel, because I will not be talking about a single game. This is more on reflecting and thinking about the games that I've reviewed this year, and what games really stood out to me the most. 2024 has had a lot of great games that were released, not only on the mobile platform but also on PC and consoles as well. But for the sake of not having a very lengthy video, I will only focus on the mobile games that I've played this year. Majority of the games that I've covered are mostly the highly anticipated and most hyped games in the market. Although, I'm pretty sure that I still missed a few major game releases, I will try to do better and cover more games moving forward, starting on 2025. Some of the games that I've covered this year were great, some were mid, and of course, some were not really something that I would play. These games were not really bad, but these were games that are pretty much catered to a specific audience. In this video, I will focus on the 3 games that really stood out to me the most. The first one is the Ragnarok Mobile Classic. In my humble opinion, I think this game will do good, especially if the developers will stay true to their word that this will have very minimal microtransactions. I think the single currency is quite unique, especially if you compare it to other MMORPGs in the market. And that will surely remove a lot of the paywalls that other games have, especially when it comes to having multiple currencies in the game. Of course, some players will try to exploit the system by creating multiple characters to farm Zenny, and some will still spend a lot of money in order to get an edge over players. But at the end of the day, that will still be dependent on the player's preference and goals. If a player wants to do those things, that's fine. If a player just wants to play the game casually and enjoy creating and progressing a character, that's fine as well. The main point of playing a game is to enjoy what you are doing, and not to stress yourself more because you are putting pressure on yourself to meet certain goals. There will always be the hardcore competitive players, and there are also the casual player base in a game. That is normal, as that is typically what builds an MMORPG's ecosystem. Although the graphics and design are quite old, since this is basically the same with Eternal Love, I think this game will do good once it starts the open beta test. Moving on to the next game that really stood out to me is the Ragnarok game. I really had high hopes for this one, especially when we are talking about bringing the nostalgia back from the good old days. It got a lot of hype, a lot of traction, as the main selling point of this game is to bring back the classic Ragnarok game from the early 2000s. And it delivered quite a bit, especially when we are talking about the visual side of things. Seeing the old graphics of the classic Ragnarok game was very nostalgic to me, as someone who played that game back in the day. Unfortunately, that is the only thing that is nostalgic about that game. All of the other things included in the game are coming from the more modern style of the MMORPG genre. The builds for each class are very linear and one-dimensional, and most of the time, you will hear people say, "Oh, don't worry, you can try that build out in the endgame." I think that to me has already removed the joy of creating your own build in the game, because if you want to progress in a good pace or you don't want to get left behind, you have to follow what the meta build is. Another thing that really made me laugh about this game are the microtransactions, and how they are promoting these things in the game. It felt like every minute, a new pop-up will appear on your screen, telling you to top up in the game. Heck, if your character dies in-game, it will even offer you top-up options to help your character progress even more. I mean, it's absurd to see the number of microtransactions in this game. That's probably the reason why this game has very low ratings in the app and Google Play stores. But after playing for a couple of weeks, one question stood out to me. What if the nostalgia runs out? What's next? Because I'm pretty sure majority of the players who tried this game is all about the nostalgic feeling. Are they going to stay with the game, or are they going back to their original games? Only time will tell what the answer to that question is. And finally, the game that really stood out to me this year, it's the Tree of Savior Neverland. In my humble opinion, I think this game is probably the best game that I've reviewed in 2024. The game is fun, the graphics are good, the gameplay and mechanics are easy to learn, and most of all, they made an emphasis on the importance of the role-playing aspect of TOS. I think that is what is missing in most MMORPGs nowadays. I mean, that is why this genre is called an MMORPG, a massive multiplayer online role-playing game. There is a reason why there are different classes and specializations in this genre, because this allows players to select a role and use their specializations in overcoming obstacles and instances in the game. Most MMORPGs in the market doesn't have this aspect anymore, because they are more focused on the amount of money players will spend in their microtransactions, instead of making a game where each class has their own strengths and weaknesses. And forming a party with the right mix allows players to overcome challenges in-game. Games nowadays allows players to be the DPS, tank, and support in one character, as long as you spend a huge amount of money in their game, which basically defeats the purpose of playing a multiplayer game, since you can do everything on your own. However, in TOS, that doesn't really happen, as each class is built how they are supposed to be played. In my experience playing this game, a tank, DPS, and a support all need each other to complete dungeons and instances in the game. The tanks were built to absorb high amounts of damage from the opponent, do crowd control skills, and they have a lesser damage than the DPS. DPS were built to have a high damage output, however, they are very squishy regardless if you have a high tier equipment set. And the supports were built to be not as sturdy as tanks, and doesn't really have a high damage as the main DPS, but they can give buffs and heals in a party. Each class has their own strength that complements the weakness of the other class, which again, what an MMORPG is supposed to be in the first place. That is why if you ask me, out of all the games that I reviewed, this is probably the best one when we are talking about the core of an MMORPG. Majority of the negative comments that I got for this game is that this game is not the same as the original Tree of Savior game. I mean, sure, copying an IP and making a different game out of the same IP is not really new. Just look at how many Ragnarok games are there in the market. Just because a game is coming from the same IP doesn't necessarily mean that the game is bad. Although, just to be clear, this is just my personal opinion and how I view things in an MMORPG. I think this is also the reason why a lot of newer games coming out are no longer called an MMORPG. Instead, they are called an MMO, as they have already removed the role-playing aspect of the game, which further enhances my point that if you spend a huge amount of money, you can be whatever you want to be. But anyway, these are the games that really stood out to me in my reviews this year. If you want more content like this, talking about other games not only in the mobile platform, but also on PC and consoles as well, just let me know. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like, and if you want to see more game reviews, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Happy New Year!
You're a superhero.